Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Tombstones and Travels. A few weeks back I took a couple weeks off and traveled out to the Four Corners region of the United States. It was an amazing trip filled with the unique and magnificent beauty that is the Great Southwest. One of my stops was in Taos, New Mexico. Taos is a small town with a full-time population of about 6,000. It is known for its adobe buildings and a thriving art community. It is also known for being the home of explorer, mountain man, Army Scout, and Indian agent Christopher Houston Carson, better known in the history books as Kit. Just a short walk from the plaza is the home that Kit and his wife Josefa lived in from 1843 until their deaths in 1868. The four-room home that we see today was built in 1825 and was owned by Josefa's relatives. It was acquired by Kit and Josefa in 1843 and was their primary home for the next 25 years or so. Because of Kit's duties as an Army Scout and Indian agent, the couple was away from Taos for extended periods, but they kept their home and always returned to the place that they both loved. In early 1868, the couple again left Taos for Colorado. It was there that they both died. Josefa died on April 23, 1868. Kit followed just a month later, on May 23, 1868. After the couple's death, the home passed through a series of owners before it was acquired by the Bit Masonic Lodge No. 42, which was the lodge founded by Kit Carson. While the lodge tried to protect and preserve the home, it fell into a state of disrepair and remained so until about 1952. That's when the Kit Carson Memorial Foundation set about restoring the property. Today, the foundation operates the property as a museum dedicated to preserving its history and telling the amazing story of Kit Carson. As you walk through the house, you will see recreated furniture along with a few artifacts that actually belonged to Kit and his wife, including his saber and the desk he used while serving as the Indian agent for the Native Americans in the Four Corners region. Today, the Kit Carson Home and Museum is largely supported by tour admissions, gift shop purchases, and kindly donations. After completing my self-guided tour of the house, I made the short walk to the Kit Carson Memorial Park, which is located down an alley almost directly behind the historic home. Here among the bandstand and baseball fields is the Kit Carson Memorial Cemetery. Like most cemeteries, there's a few monuments and memorials that have been erected here to honor those who serve and protect and defend our freedom. As I walked through the cemetery, I passed the graves of a number of the early pioneers who first settled this area. Like Stephen Lewis Lee, who was an early trapper and fur trader and was a business partner of Kit Carson. Lee owned a house next to Kit and in later years operated a store and tavern on the plaza. Lee is also known for distilling his own spirits that became known as Taos Lightning. Tucked away in a back corner of this small cemetery, we find the final resting place of Kit and Josefa Carson, along with several of the children and grandchildren. Christopher Houston Carson was born in Richmond, Kentucky on Christmas Eve, 1809. His father was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. About a year after Kit was born, the family moved to Boone's Lick, Missouri, and settled on land that they purchased from the sons of Daniel Boone. In 1818, Kit's father died suddenly when a tree limb fell on him while he was clearing a field. For 4 years, Kit's mother endured hard times while trying to raise her children. Finally, when Kit was in his early teens, he left home and moved to Franklin, Missouri, where he took a job at a leather and saddle shop. Franklin was on the eastern end of the Santa Fe Trail, and many of the customers in the saddle shop were trappers and mountain men who thrilled Kit with tales of the faraway mountains. In 1826, Kit joined up with several fur traders and headed west on the Santa Fe Trail. A few months later, Kit settled for the first time here in the area around Taos. It was here that he learned the skills of a trapper and became fluent in Spanish and several Indian languages. In 1829, at the age of 20, Kit left Taos and began the life of a fur trapper and mountain man, traveling with the likes of Jim Bridger, Jim Beckworth, and William Sublette. For the better part of the next 10 years, Kit earned a reputation as a good trapper and as a reliable man. He was one of the most popular and successful trappers at the annual Trappers' Rendezvous. By 1840, beaver was getting scarce and the rendezvous played out. It was in 1841 that Kit was hired as a hunter for Bent's Fort. He was paid $1 a day to hunt and provide meat for several hundred people who lived in and around the fort. In the spring of 1842, Kit returned to Missouri to visit relatives. It was there he met a man named John C. Fremont, who was on his way to lead an expedition into the West. After the two men talked, Fremont hired Kit as a guide and scout. The job paid $100 a month, the most money Kit had ever earned. Kit stayed with Fremont for several years, guiding separate expeditions across Wyoming and the Columbia River of Oregon and Washington, and across the Great Southwest into the Great Salt Lake of Utah. In 1843, while guiding Fremont along the Santa Fe Trail, the party stopped here in Taos, where Kit met and married his wife Josefa. The couple bought a house here in Taos from Josefa's relatives. It would be the only real home Kit Carson ever had. After leaving Fremont, Kit served as an Army scout during the Mexican-American War from 1846 until 1848. Following the war, Kit returned to Taos where he tried his hand at farming and ranching. Then in 1854, Kit served as one of the first federal Indian agents for the Four Corners area. It was a thankless job. Kit was required to persuade the Indians to submit to the will of the government while trying to ensure that they were being treated fairly. Kit was well thought of by the Indians. They often referred to him as Father Kit. On the other hand, Kit's constant lobbying on behalf of the Indians rankled some high-ranking government officials, who often called him the white man with the Indian heart. Kit served as Indian agent until 1861, when Civil War broke out back east. While most of the Civil War battles was fought in the east, the Southwest was not immune from the conflict. General Henry Sibley convinced Confederate President Jefferson Davis to allow him to lead a cavalry unit into the Southwest to take control of New Mexico and Arizona territories. When Sibley captured a portion of southern New Mexico, the call for volunteers went out. Kit answered the call and resigned as an Indian agent and joined the volunteers under the command of Colonel Edward Canby. During the Civil War, several small skirmishes took place between the Texans, loyal to the Confederacy, and the New Mexico and Colorado volunteers. The largest battle took place in March of 1862 near Glorita. It was here that New Mexico and Colorado volunteers destroyed a Confederate supply train, which forced the Confederates to retreat and abandon their invasion of New Mexico. In November 1864, Kit was again serving as an Army scout and was involved in the campaigns against the Apache and Navajo. On November 25th, 1864, Kit participated in the first Battle of Adobe Walls. This turned out to be his last military engagement. In 1865, Kit, whose health was failing, became the superintendent of Indian Affairs and moved his family to Boggsville, Colorado. Shortly after arriving in Colorado, Josefa gave birth to their third daughter, Stella. 2 years later, in 1867, Kit was in such poor health that when he traveled to Washington to negotiate a treaty with the Utes, he had to be transported most of the way in an Army ambulance. Kit returned to Colorado in March of 1868, where he was reunited with Josefa, who was expecting the couple's 8th child. Josephine Carson was born on April 13, 1868. It was reported to be a very difficult birth for Josefa, and 2 weeks later, on April 23, 1868, Josefa Carson died. Exactly 1 month later, Kit Carson suffered a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The man that led the way west died on May 23, 1868. Kit and Josefa were originally buried in Boggsville, Colorado. They were later reinterred here in the Kit Carson Memorial Cemetery in Taos, New Mexico, the place they called home. There are several members of Kit and Josefa's immediate family resting here in Taos, including their son, Kit Carson II, his wife, Lupe, and their daughters, Josie and Nettie. Kit's grandsons are also resting here. Alan Carson served in both World War I and World War II and lived until 1976. And Christopher Charles Carson was a veteran of World War II. He passed away in 1999. Also resting here with the Carson family is Lieutenant Colonel John J. McCurdy. It seems that Kit Carson was his idol, and it was his last wish to be buried near him. And so he was. With that, I'm going to end this video here at the grave of the old mountain man, Kit Carson. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider ringing that bell and subscribing. And if you're so inclined, a thumbs up is always appreciated. Now, until next week, please remember, life is a wonderful journey. Be sure to take time and enjoy it. And I'll see you down the road. So long, everybody.